We have on the Newsmaker hotline Andrew McCarthy, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, who was involved in a 1995 terrorism prosecution against Sheik Omar Abdel Rahman and 11 others. These are, of course, defendants from the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Mr. McCarthy, thanks for joining us.
Morning. Nice to be with you.
I want to start by exploring what is a person of interest, because we have these reports, many reports, that there is a person of interest being held at a hospital. Not really held, but receiving treatment at the hospital. At the same time, Fox News is reporting that a house that was searched in nearby Revere, Massachusetts, apparently is a place where this guy either lived or had stayed at some point. Right. So that is what we know, at least initially. When a person is classified as a person of interest, what does that really mean?
Well, you know, it's interesting. This is a term that really, I think, has developed over the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years. And I really think it's a product of a tough national security environment. It used to be that what we had were basically suspects and witnesses. And when the worst thing that happens in your usual law enforcement environment are, you know, drug gang murders or mafia murders or that sort of thing, and you're not really worrying about mass murder attacks, you can afford to hold off on aggressively going after someone until you have enough evidence or close to enough evidence to arrest them. And in that old environment, we used to talk about suspects and witnesses. Now, the wages of a mass murder attack are so horrific that we have to have some way to classify people who you would want to talk to because they seem, under the circumstances, obviously to have information, if not be participants in what happened. But you don't have enough evidence to arrest them.
All right.
So you're not prepared to say that they're suspects yet. And that's, I think, how we've come up with this term, person of interest.
Now, is that person of interest, if perhaps he wasn't really seriously injured, would that person of interest be free to leave? Well,
that's the interesting thing, and that really, in my mind, is what separates someone from being, the dividing line between a suspect and a person of interest is if the person is not free to leave, he's under arrest. And if he's under arrest for any length of time, you have to have probable cause to arrest him. You can detain somebody temporarily on reasonable suspicion, but then you have to let him go once you've had an opportunity to resolve the suspicion. So if the guy is free to leave, he is, he is perhaps still a person of interest, but not a suspect. If you're ready to cut off his liberty, you have to have enough evidence to charge him.
Andrew McCarthy joins us. He's a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. And your article yesterday at the Corner, nationalreview.com, was quite good, I think. It's great to have somebody like you who can bring your perspective to this. And I want to ask you about one specific thing. You said the government and the media have demonstrated a disturbing tendency to withhold and massage facts in these incidents. And if I can continue, you said government and journalists who are invested in fairy tale narratives often use the need for reasonable law enforcement secrecy to stanch the normal flow of information or try to management in the service of the narrative. Can you please expand on that thought a little bit?
Yeah, I was thinking in particular of Fort Hood, although this is not the only instance of this phenomenon that we've seen. But you have a lot of people who are invested in what I think is the fairy tale that Islamic supremacist ideology doesn't have anything to do with terrorism committed by Muslims. And every time you have a situation where there is a terrorist attack committed by Muslims, they do handstands either to avoid acknowledging that it's terrorism or to avoid acknowledging that it was inspired by Islamic supremacist ideology, which they don't want to recognize because that has roots in Islamic culture. And, we're operating under this canard that if you acknowledge that reality, we are somehow at war with Islam. So I think you've seen over the years government officials and media people go through contortions to try to basically either close our eyes to what reality is or massage facts into something different from what they are, so that a jihadist attack, for example, becomes workplace violence.
In the case of Fort Hood, yes.
Right.
Also, there are reports from CNN that ball bearings or possibly nails, other shrapnel, were included in these explosive devices. And I wonder, when you hear details like that, does that suggest to you any point of origin? Is that a signature of certain groups? Or and again, I don't want you to speculate, just draw on your experience.
Well, it's really it's an old-time practice of terrorists. You know, you may remember we had some business about the Weather Underground being in the news about a week ago, and you know, the bombs they used to make were filled with shrapnel too. So it's really a kind of a common way of improvising an explosive device. The one thing I will say about it is you can't discount the possibility of it being a jihadist attack simply because the devices were small, because the terrorists are influenced by the most important relevant terrorist events that are going on in the world. And the most important one we've had in the last 10 years is the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, where they've been able to wage terrorism by improvised explosive devices. And, you know, these are not as huge as, say, the World Trade Center bomb, but they're very effective devices because they're small and they can be camouflaged in the area where you want them to detonate. All
right, let me ask you a question. As a former prosecutor, it hasn't reached, of course, the prosecution phase yet, but you certainly are involved, if you're a prosecutor, with the ongoing investigation. What kinds of things are the investigators coming to you with if you're in that situation?
Usually, if you have people who are in custody, or if you have people who you think have information, witnesses, you're getting that information from the agents. Sometimes the prosecutors are involved in some of that questioning. On the basis of it, you're issuing subpoenas and search warrants, going to courts to get search warrants, such as the one that you mentioned before that they did in the outskirts of Boston. Mm-hmm. You're trying to, if you think you have an operating theory about who might have done it, you're chasing phone records and possibly even financial records on a quick turnaround to try to, connect the dots, as they say.
Working hand in hand. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for your perspective. I think it's very helpful. Andrew McCarthy, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York.
Thanks so much.